The views and opinions of shows on KCNR are those of the hosts, guests, and callers only, and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff, management, or advertisers of KCNR Radio. And now, Carl and Linda Bott. This is Free Fire Radio.
Good morning, and welcome back to Free Fire Radio here in the studios at KCNR 96.5 FM and 1460 AM, your talk radio with Carl and Linda Bott. Linda's on assignment. Why? Because we have this huge event coming at the Cascade Theater on Saturday called Encore, and James Santos has come back to be the producer and director of this. And what they've done is they've taken people who have been in other shows at the Cascade musicals or music events at the Cascade, and they put them together. So you're going to have a night of singing and dancing that is just outstanding. Okay, it's Shasta County Citizens Advocating Respect regular day. Susan Wilson, and you brought a guest.
I did, and it's delightful to be here on Juneteenth. My guest today is Nathan. I'm going to let Nathan do some of the introduction of himself because he knows a lot more about himself than I do. But I met Nathan on a telephone call, a couple-hour telephone call, a little while ago, and I thought he would be of interest to us as we approach the whole mission of Shasta County Citizens Advocating Respect, and that is advocating respect and figuring out how we do really hard things respectfully, the right way. You know, how do we change things that way? So Nathan's my hero in a way, you know, because he's been through some hard things here in Shasta County, and I think it's really important that we support his efforts to do things, respond to things that have happened to him in a way that moves our county forward, you know. Anyway, so that's what I'm after.
Okay, and just to let everybody know, if you've got questions or comments when you call in, Pat's going to write them down because I lose control. Yeah, I don't want this to become a what's the word I could use? A pissing contest about on all of this. Well, and it will be. So I just want to. I want to be able to. Talk about this issue, and I'll
in
ask
a respectful
questions.
way, the way that's important to me.
I will ask your questions. Go to our chat room, KCNR1460.com. Hop in there; it's easy. Or just if you have a question, just call and give it to Pat. And remember, Pat's just answering the phone. He gets paid a magnificent salary of less than I think you're up to minimum wage now.
It's all worth it, Carl. It's worth it. It's community radio.
Okay. Nathan.
Thank you for having me on the show, Carl. And thank you, Susan. I just think this is a great opportunity to be able to, talk about recent events in Shasta County, certain socio-political issues that the county's dealing with. And, like when that thing that happened at the board chambers, it happened to me, and I was sort of the main person involved there, but I think it sort of represents a larger, issue that is going on in Shasta County, especially with some of the local politicians that we have.
In your opinion here.
Yes.
Okay. And we have our ground rules, too, that we went over. So,
yes.
Okay, well, let's start with the biggest one, if you don't mind, on what happened at the board chambers.
So, I've been attending those meetings since around June of 2020 or so. I've spoken many, many times. Probably it's 75% of the meetings since then I've attended, and, spoken for my 3 minutes, sometimes multiple times during a meeting. And Mr. Alex Bilecki, he's a gentleman, but he's a guy that's attended those meetings for as long as I can remember.
And city council, by the way.
Yeah,
I've been to those.
Council,
yeah,
right.
so I mean that's how I know him.
Yeah. And I found out after all the stuff came out that he'd actually previously had a restraining order against him. Cut now.
We're cutting out there, buddy. We okay? Okay.
Good.
Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
For sending some sort of, or saying some sort of threatening thing to one of the previous supervisors, and since that supervisor's no longer there, he was allowed to re-enter the meetings.
Okay.
And so a lot of the times when I've seen him speak, it seemed a little, disjointed, kind of difficult to follow what his point is during his public comments. And I believe he knows who I am. He's been there many times that I've been there. He knows my ideologies, and it's hard for me to believe that he doesn't at this point. And so he was speaking on that issue of putting tiny homes in Shasta County, which I actually did. I do commend Chris Kellstrom for, proposing some sort of affordable housing for the county. But for some reason, Mr. Bilecki didn't seem to appreciate that, and he said that he's not a fool and that he's not that word. And I was sitting in the front row, and there's a way that he sort of delivers his public comments where he doesn't. You're supposed to spend your time speaking to the Board of Supervisors and addressing the Board of Supervisors. He will turn his entire body to the audience and speak to the audience, And I've actually seen supervisors correct other people in the past and say you need to address the board instead of people in the audience. But he was looking at the audience, looked at me multiple times, and then he says that word, and it just angered me. It made me very angry. I just felt like, I've been referred to that. I've been called that word a number of times over the years in this county, and to have that word be allowed, to be spoken in what's supposed to be a government public meeting, it just didn't seem right, And so I got upset. I broke the decorum rules. I, yelled at him, told him to shut up. And then I felt like in that moment that it would have been a good thing for the chair of the board to at least tell Mr. Bilecki that he should not be using language like that, especially in a government meeting, because there's already, the rules of decorum on the public comment card that vulgarity and things like that are not to be used. And I think it was a little bit frustrating for me that instead of chastising Mr. Bilecki for using the most powerful word in the English language, that the chair chose to, reprimand me for being upset about it.
For speaking from your seat, right?
Speaking from the seat,
now,
yeah.
This is where, and then at that point, you chose to leave.
I did, yes.
Okay, see, and this is where it's morphed into, if you don't mind me saying it, it's morphed into that you were told to leave right after that comment.
Which you were not.
I was not,
you weren't.
no.
You chose to get up and say, hey, look, I'm going to cool off.
Yep, that's exactly what I did.
It was later on that you were at, that they escorted you out.
Right.
What I want to make clear to everybody, though, is that when the things I read is when Bilecki said that, and it's a horrible word, that it was given the impression that when you complained about it, you were escorted out of the room. Right. And that's not what happened.
No, I was escorted out when
later on
when I came back in, and this is probably at least 20 minutes after coming back in. I sat there, I was completely quiet, listening to other public commenters, and then Supervisor Tim Garman, after one of the public comment had ended, or I believe somebody was done, he spoke up and said that that he was appalled by that word. There's no racism is not, I think he said racism sucks and there's no place for it in this day and age. And then Supervisor Mary Rickert, joined in and also condemned that language. And I think it was at this point where Supervisor or Chair Jones could have just gone on to the next issue on the agenda. But I believe he knew that his words, what he was going to say, were going to upset me. He decided to take that opportunity to use the First Amendment to defend Alex Bilecki's usage of that word. And then, they say that I yelled at him from the crowd in that moment. I was sitting in the very front row. I basically spoke at this volume and I interrupted him and I said, so it's okay to use that word, but it's not okay for me to do what I'm doing right now. And then Jones actually yelled back at me much louder than I had spoken to him and said, asked the sheriff's deputy to I think he said something like, "You're doing it again, Nathan. You're breaking out from the audience." And then I said, "I don't care." At that point, I was very frustrated that Jones decided to make that decision he could have, what best case scenario, he could have condemned that language, but even better, just said nothing and moved on. But I think the point that he chose to defend Mr. Bilecki's usage of that word was specifically to upset me, and it did. I believe.
That's what you think.
That is my opinion.
Belief. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, we got to take a quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk about that a little bit. Welcome back to Free Fire Radio here in the studios at KCNR 96.5 FM and 1460 AM. Your talk radio with Carl and Bott. Today, Juneteenth. I'm here with Shasta County Citizens Advocating Respect and Susan Wilson, and she brought Nathan as her guest today, and Nathan is well known in the community for a variety of reasons. We're talking about what happened at the Board of Supervisors meeting the other day when this guy used a very pejorative term. It has no place. It
has no place in our society anywhere.
Any type of racial degradation, whether it's black, white, Hispanic, Asian, any of these, it doesn't have a spot. And then what happened afterwards, and we cleared up that he was not asked to leave right after that was said. He left. Nathan left on his own, and then later on, he was escorted out. Jones apologized after that.
Jones, I think there's a difference between apologizing and saying sorry. So I think when you apologize, you are apologizing for an action from yourself. And Jones stated that he, was sorry for what Mr. Bilecki had said, but not for his action, or at least inaction, of not immediately condemning that word and then having me escorted from the chambers. So, I stated at that meeting that if Jones could have actually apologized for his own actions, then I could have accepted that apology, but he didn't, and then in turn I didn't accept that apology.
Well, here's the thing about apologies. I got stuck in that too. Somebody said something on our station that was not right. I immediately took him off the air. Got rid of all of his archives immediately.
Right.
Apologized, but it wasn't enough. That apology was weak sauce. Oh, okay. I don't know. So I apologized again, and that still wasn't good enough. And so I said, fine. Third time, I wrote it, said, I'm sorry it happened. I didn't say it. Linda didn't say it. We took action right away. And by the way, if you look at your publication, there's a lot of horrible things being said there. I don't hold you responsible for that. Mm-hmm. And that's the last part on it. So maybe I'm a little prickly about apologies.
Right.
Taking the time to do it, and because it doesn't meet the quote parameters.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a level of intention that can be felt when somebody is actually truly remorseful for something that they've done. You can say words, but you can definitely tell when somebody is actually sorry for an action that they have done. And I don't feel Mr. Jones was. I think that there was a lot of people in that room that day that were in opposition to him, and I believe that he was most likely, suggested to at least make some sort of apology to me on behalf of the community for whatever reason. But I've stated earlier that I believe Mr. Jones was attempting to upset me, which again, that was my opinion, but this is just based off of my interaction with Jones in the past. 2 years ago at a board meeting, during a situation that happened at Market Street Blade and Barrel that I don't really want to get into again, I had asked Mr. Jones a question during my public comment, and he responded by saying that I don't like you. I think you're a domestic terrorist. You participated in the Seattle riots, which, by the way, I did not. I've never participated in a riot in my entire life. And so he's just clearly had a disdain for me for quite a while.
So it's more of a, you think it's a personal thing?
I do believe it's fully personal. I do believe, personally, Mr. Jones does not like me.
And that does happen, that does happen.
Yeah.
One of the comments I'd like to make, though, quickly is that I always think it's awkward when someone is expected to apologize for what somebody else does. So I go back to your thing. What you expected, actually, from Mr. Jones was to apologize for his behavior,
right,
not for Mr. Bilecki's behavior.
No.
And I think that that's a really important factoid in this whole discussion.
Well, but also, when Mr. Jones said, he was talking about the First Amendment, there's an online publication called the Shasta Scout, Annalise Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
And
a lot of respect for that woman.
So do I. And she put in there, she went to an organization that their whole mission is the First Amendment. And he addressed this. And, the fact is, as horrible as it falls under his First Amendment rights. Now, how it was handled at the meeting, we can argue about that one back and forth. I know how I would have handled it, but it's, now I'm looking at Monday morning quarterbacking.
Right.
If it had happened. I think I know what I would have done. But I can't lay that on Nathan, and I can't lay it on
someone
Jones
else.
or Cry or any of them. So
no, I don't blame Patrick Jones for what Mr. Bilecki said.
Yeah,
he couldn't control that.
But then you did bring up and when he could have addressed it, he talked about the First Amendment, and the First Amendment, and as rough as it is at times, I mean, it protects you and things you say. And so, and you say some contentious things, Nathan,
right.
You know it.
I think we all say contentious things.
We all do. I mean,
so
I
don't want Nathan to take the responsibility for humankind.
No. I'm just saying is that we all do that.
Yeah, we do. We do.
And
we do. And we deserve the protection. But that goes back then, Carl, to what are social norms for our culture?
Well, that's what I hope we can get into on this, and what bigotry really is. Yeah. And that'll be after the break, though. Hey, welcome back to Free Fire Radio here in the studios at KCNR 96.5 FM and 1460 AM, your talk radio with Carl and Bott. I'm here with Susan Wilson from Shasta County Citizens Advocating Respect, and she brought with her Nathan Blaze. I wasn't sure which way we were going here. Yeah. And we're talking about what happened in the board meeting, but in the aftermath and all this. But I wanted to move on back to Susan here, and we're talking about in the culture in Northern California, maybe all of California. Bigotry, if you look at the definition, and I hate doing this, but it kind of puts us on the same level. Obstinate or unreasonable attachment to a belief, opinion, or faction in particular prejudice against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular group.
So this is one of my favorite conversations.
I know. And because, bigotry, in my opinion, goes across the whole spectrum.
Surely it does.
Surely
it does. And we on this show have talked before about sort of the background, some of the background of bigotry. Some of bigotry is explicit. I feel this way, blah, 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 blah. But there's also a part of bigotry that's implicit or unconscious. We grow up in a family. We grow up a certain way. We grow up in a certain place. We learn certain things. And they become part of our brain evolution and the way that we respond to things. And one of the things about bigotry I think that we need to keep in mind is that, having just read White Fragility for about the third time, we need to keep in mind that we just have to bigotry is something that we have to stay really conscious of. So one of the things that I did after this happened was I talked with David Benda, and he quoted me really well in the newspaper. And I said, This isn't particularly a First Amendment issue to me because I don't know enough about the First Amendment. But I will tell you that we have social norms. And part of what our social norms are meant to do is to deal with things like bigotry. To deal with things that shouldn't have to have rules in a constitution to deal with. We want to face up to who we are, each of us. We want to stay conscious of. There are things that I'm really conscious of. I don't happen to worry about some of them because they're not in my world at this point in time, but there are things that I'm really conscious of. I'm really conscious of, for example, I work 30 years with people with disabilities, mental retardation. I am really conscious of when somebody goes, well, what is that stupid woman doing? And I just want to go over and slap them in the face.
You
have a
hard time.
You mean I can't say, what is that stupid guy doing? I can't say that? Are you talking about somebody that's got a mental problem?
I'm talking about someone with a mental problem.
So they're out there
calling them out.
They're out there screaming in the street. So somebody's got a problem. I think most people understand that. But to use the term, boy, was that a stupid comment, is not bigotry.
Well, maybe the thing is, we can take anything out of context and make it into something else. You can take almost any comment out of context. And so, to me, language, working with people, is contextual. It's where you are, who you're with, and why you're saying what you're saying. Where does it come from? And I think just as a society, we have to become much more conscious of what we're saying and how we're saying it.
Okay.
The First Amendment or not.
Okay. But have we become, in the last 10 years, more fragile?
I think it's just evolution and people understanding and realizing that there are certain things that are disparaging.
Have we taken it too far in many cases?
I'm not sure.
You go to college and you can't say, things you used to say in college or you used to be able to say, all of a sudden it's become trigger words.
Right.
Oh God, you can't say that.
I went to Berkeley.
You got to go to a safe space after you hear something, and it's like, really?
Well,
didn't we all grow up in a society where we fell off our bikes and fist fights? And I don't think it's. We've gotten to a point where, and I'm not saying there is. Things that you should be upset about. But we've gotten to the point where it's little things that causes all types of discontent over things that it just, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it just, bounced off people.
Yeah, I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago we were not nearly as conscious of some of the issues for individuals as we are today. That's where I would go with that comment.
Okay, we have questions. Okay, Pat.
Okay, Pat.
Well, Pat's on the phone with somebody else with a question.
I'm here, Carl.
Okay, so what are the give me
Give
some
us
of the
a
questions.
question.
Okay, the gentleman had a rhetorical question at first, and then the second part of the question is what he's asking. He says, does or should the First Amendment apply at the dinner table? So that was the rhetorical part. Mm-hmm. And then he said, should we expect the same level of decorum at public meetings?
Okay. What?
And my answer, and I train mental health boards and do a lot of work with the Brown Act around the state. I think that, yes, we should. We should. There's no reason why the dinner table should be angry, beating each other up, foul language either. We have to learn to model the behavior that we want to see. Right. And if we can't model that behavior at home,
if you have to flip a switch to go out in public to not say hateful things that you would normally say in the comfort of your own home, then maybe it should be a little bit more modeled at home. So that way,
I agree with. Yeah, I agree with you that the way you are at home.
models your behavior.
Now, there's, when you go after your sister or brother and they come back at you, I look at that as different. Okay, right. That's different. But if you have to, we shouldn't be in a society that you have to watch everything you say. I don't care what you're saying. From what side. You shouldn't have to watch everything you say because people are people and they will make a mistake.
I don't really think you have to watch everything you say. Have you guys ever heard of the paradox of tolerance? I can't remember who came up with this, but it's basically saying that as a society we cannot tolerate intolerance. And so I believe there's a group of people that are intolerant of people based on their sexual orientation, based on their race, their gender, and then there's another group of people that are intolerant of those people because of their intolerance of people for things they can't help. So there are people that are angry with the way a certain type of person is, and then will be hateful and bigoted towards those people. And then there are other people that will be hateful towards those people for being hateful to other people.
And that's opinions. The paradox of tolerance.
Yes.
I have to look that up. That's very interesting to me.
But see what we're talking about. We got to take a break.
Yeah,
is we've siloed ourselves, thanks to our media and our politicians. We've siloed ourselves into these groups. That we didn't used to have.
We built big walls.
Yeah, which we didn't used to have. So the tolerance for people has gone away. And I can blame two things, and I could be wrong or not. One of them, social media, but the other one was COVID. COVID seemed to have
a negative effect.
If you read the latest Nathan, he's an author for Aaron. He's an author for The Nation magazine, is what I was trying to say. He did an article on Shasta County, and he drove around with me, and I showed him different things about it.
I remember this.
Yeah, and the thing is that he kind of lays it on where things were all were kind of like this, and then when COVID hit, we as a county, as a nation, started splitting up. So
COVID was a splitter.
Everybody was stuck at home for too long with nothing to do.
Oh my God! And what did they have in front of them?
They had a computer.
They had a computer
and a bunch of differing opinions.
And we've all said things on that computer, but I've seen things on that computer, and I'm thinking, you would never say that to somebody.
That's exactly right.
You would never.
And that's
say
where
that.
Social media comes in, and I think one of the things that we need to be conscious of is, what have we taught our children? What have we taught our children now as we move forward? I know we need to take a break, but I'd like to hit on that when we get back.
Sure, and then we'll get to some more questions here. Hey, welcome back to Free Fire Radio here in the studios of KCNR 96.5 FM and 1460 AM, your talk radio station. We're here with Susan Wilson from Shasta County Citizens Advocating Respect, and Nathan Blades, who is her guest, and my guest here. And we're talking about bigotry. We're talking about what happened at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And as we talked about during the break, is we don't have to agree on anything,
right?
But we do owe it to ourselves to be able to discuss it without getting angry and calling each other names and those kind of things.
Staying conscious of our behavior.
Yeah. Okay, Pat, what are the questions? You were going to kind of roll them into one because they were all about the same.
Right. We had 3 callers, and they all roll into one. One lady said, what about the golden rule? Okay, you don't have to answer these yet. Let me get to the end. And the second question is a profanity appropriate at meetings? And then the third guy went on to say, so if you dish it out, I'm paraphrasing, are you willing to take it? In other words, I think the question here is, if you use the N-word, say you're a black gentleman and you use the N-word in your culture, and then you don't expect that to be used against you, or you think it's okay. How do you justify that? What does that model for people? Okay, those are all it's kind of like the golden rule principle here. So let's address that.
So I would first like to at least point out that I believe that's sort of a bad faith argument, a false equivocation. So the golden rule, right? So I believe Mr. Eddie McAllister is the one who he didn't get to speak at the last meeting, but my fiance actually had the privilege of reading his intended speech for the public comment, and he stated that there is an intention behind things that you say. So when a black person, in their culture uses the N-word, first of all, black culture, especially young black culture, and this goes back to even 70s and 80s, started taking that word back and taking the negative meaning out of it. They even changed the spelling, taking the ER off the end and adding an A. It became a term of endearment. It became a positive term within black culture that took that very disparaging meaning out of it. So when a black person says it, the intention behind it is not the same when somebody who has never gone through what it was like to, be black in America or have the generational trauma from hundreds of years of slavery. The intention behind it is different. So 8 years ago, when I make a cover of a rap song that features the N-word, with the A at the end.
I must have gotten 3 emails on that one.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying...
Well, it's not a lot of emails, but they're all about the same thing. Well, listen to this.
That's why I'm saying it's a false equivocation, because my intention behind it is not the same intention as Mr. Bilecki's intention behind it, or when somebody calls me that word from a fake account on Facebook. So there is a difference, and I don't believe that every culture gets access to every other culture's words. So I'd like to give an example. I worked at the old 501 Club, which was gay bar in Reading, and I worked there for 4 years. And one day, a number of the regulars, gay gentlemen, gave me my honorary F-word card,
I was trying to figure that out at first. Then I got it.
Yeah.
Because the first F word I think of was not that one.
Not the middle finger F word,
right. I got it.
And so that was more so a symbolic gesture of them telling me that I was a safe ally within their community, but that didn't mean that I got the privilege to now go around and start using that word or referring to LGBTQ people with that word, because it's not my word to say. So my intention behind using it would be different than when a gay man greets another gay man with that word.
Well, this leads me to a whole new stream of questions here, but I'm not going to start that because I've got one question here that's interesting, but I wanted to let the last few minutes go to you, Susan. The question is, if you disrupt the meetings, should you apologize?
I don't believe that I'm the one that disrupted the meeting.
I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about other meetings. If you shout out or interrupt speakers and all that.
Well, is that not then my First Amendment?
Well, not according to the rules that you're using for the other one. It says you can't disrupt meetings and you can't use profanities. Right. And I'm sure they're going to find another way to write something there. If you say something that's pejorative like that there's no place for that in meetings, and you can be banned from the meetings for 2 months. But
I think if the First Amendment, people can argue that the First Amendment can protect someone using the N-word in a board meeting, then the First Amendment should also be able to protect me speaking out in a meeting as well.
And even though those are against the rules.
But technically so is using the N-word.
Oh, of course it is. No, right. I am not. No, wait a minute. I am not
Yeah.
trying to defend that. Okay, and I don't want that to come across. I'm just. Right. This is a question.
Right. So I do want to talk a little bit about the law too, and the law. The Board of Supervisors must comply with what we call the Brown Act.
Right. And
the Brown Act is law that was made many years ago, in the 60s, maybe 70s, 80s, whatever it was, that says people have the right to say what they want to say in the meetings, just unless that is not acceptable behavior.
Right.
And that's why there is a sergeant at arms in our meeting, and that's why people have been told, no, you don't say that. And so that law gives people like Mr. Jones, who are running a meeting, the opportunity to say, this is the line that we have drawn in the sand.
Right.
And one of the things that I think that my group, SCCAR, and some of the other groups of people have said is, draw the line in the sand. Mm-hmm. Tell people what the line in the sand is, because then we don't have to depend on your unconscious bias or your unconscious bias and look around the room.
Interpretations of the Constitution.
What we want to do is have a meeting where people talk to each other, try to listen to each other, try to hear each other and try to move our society forward.
Right.
And, of course, you talked about COVID being a big issue. I talk about taking away Dominion machines as a big issue. Yeah. It was also a divider.
Right.
It really was a divider in society. And it's interesting the role that these things that you think, really, that's a divider in our society, how small or large they can be.
Right.
Well, can I let me give you my 30 seconds on this.
Your wrap?
This drawing a line in the sand is just a bunch of crap. Because if you've ever been in the sand, that line disappears or it can be moved. If you're going to draw a line, draw it in concrete. Mm-hmm. This is acceptable. This isn't. Because you draw it in the sand.
I'll go with that. I go with that.
That line can move 5 feet either direction. When you say, when I heard Bush say, I'm drawing a line in the sand, it means nothing. It means that the first time the wind blows, that line's gone. Mm-hmm. So that's just a personal.
Although we do have to realize that over time, our line does move. And we talked about that during COVID. Our line moved. Because of social media, our line has moved. Right. And so
it doesn't mean it's acceptable.
No.
Not acceptable at all.
But really, I mean, if I had to give any message from this is, I think the Board of Supervisors and the city councils, for all that, need to talk about decorum and how they are going to run their meetings to make it suitable and to set an example and model for the